Good morning, friends. Oh man, we have a fun church. I don't know if you're visiting, if you're joining us online, we're like, what is happening? Like, first of all, everybody needs music to come out to. You know what I'm saying? I think we should incorporate this in businesses. You know what I'm saying? You come to work, they go, hey, play your favorite song, coming in hot, whatever you want to play. That'd be awesome. Life would be so much fun. I think Jesus had a soundtrack. What do you think? I don't know what it would be, but I don't know. Kendrick or Drake, I'm not quite sure who. No, I'm just joking. I'm just joking. Hey, gotta stick to the script here. Okay. It's too much fun this morning. Well, hey, friends, glad you are here. We are on week 5 of a series that we're doing, talking about miracles, and we're going through the book of John, not verse by verse, by miracle. And the headlines today is what? This miracle is what? Jesus walks on water. You know, I have a funny relationship with water, okay? Some of you guys are with me. I have a love-hate relationship with water, okay? I love water. The problem is when I'm in it. You know, here's the problem, okay? So I grew up in the Middle East, so some of you guys can do the math. Swimming is not my best thing. You know, not my best sport or anything for that matter. How many of you are great swimmers? You're like, I'm a swimmer. Okay. How many of you guys like shallow water and of life vest? I'm a pro. How many of you? How many of you are like, let's just split the church here. How many of you are like, hey, I'm like open water lake people. Like I'm like a lake. Give me a lake, give me a beach. Give me real natural water. Yes, okay. How many of you are like, give me a pool. Give me a pool with, you know, poolside service. Anybody? Yes. I realized something. I'm really good at swimming when it comes to shallow water. Because I learned to swim touching my feet. That's how I did it in Kuwait. I was in a pool, and the whole time I was like, this is how you swim. You actually walk, and you just kind of do things with your hands. And then I realized, oh no, there's more to it. I'm really good at shallow water, and I'm good with the life vest. I really am. The thing though I love about open water is the possibility, the beauty of it. I really do. I love water sports. I do that with a life vest, okay? And but I love it. So this morning we're going to talk about this idea of water. And I was preparing for this. I had this question kind of thrown into me, and I was just going to throw it back to you guys. Could it be possible that God's calling you and me to move out of shallow water and out of a life vest to open water and deep water? Like, could God be calling me out of shallow water and shallow relationships where I get to play a whole lot? You can play all day long in shallow water. And some of us, if you're a single adult, you know you've been dating someone and they're honestly just here for the game. They're not here for the long term because they're just playing around. And I realize sometimes there are certain areas in my life that I just like to be in shallow water. Sometimes I find myself in seasons where I'm like, I'm okay with shallow people. I'm okay with them. I don't want to go deep. I want shallow movies. Hello. I do shallow shows. I want shallow everything. Why? Because you can play around in it all day long. But what if God's calling us out of a shallow faith? Because you've been playing around with Christianity, playing around with Jesus maybe, but God's calling, hey, I want you out. No. I want you out of the shallowness into a deeper faith. Maybe God's calling you into deeper relationships and deeper commitments, not shallow commitments. Could that be possible in our life? And could you and I need to be looking for people who are not playing around in shallow water, but moving towards something deeper? And then also people who always have a life vest. You know, here's the cool thing with the life vest. It's security. It's super security. Again, you can play around all day long. In open water, you're like, you're not gonna drown unless whatever, but you're not gonna drown, right? You can hang out there because there's a sense of security. And I wonder if God has been telling me like, hey, I need you to move out of and take off the vest. Because as long as you and I live in shallow water with a life vest, we'll never walk on water. Like we'll never experience a deep supernatural if we're only concerned with making sure that we have natural security, that we're safe, we're good, we get to play. We're never going to move to, maybe God's calling us to a deeper open water relationship. In and water, not just relationship, but life, the life of possibility. So this miracle is pretty interesting because it starts off in John, and John talks about this miracle. And like some of the other miracles, this miracle is mentioned in other books as well. Like Matthew's got it, Mark's got it as well. And John kind of does this it's basically last week, if you guys remember last week, what a great message from Pastor Kristen, this idea of like you might be holding someone else's miracle. And it was great because it was talking about feeding the 5,000. Well, this miracle that we're going to be talking about, it's basically like that whole thing that happened was such a big deal because it ended up they're feeding not just 5,000, but many more when we count everybody. It was like 15, 20,000 people. And so the word spread. And so this miracle right here, the walking on water thing, is in the middle of where everybody's trying to figure out what just happened with 20,000 people. And Jesus leaves that region because he's like, there's too much pressure. There's too much stuff going on. The disciples are now celebrities. We got to get out of here. We got to get out of here. And then this miracle takes place. And then if you read the book of John, chapter 6, 7, it keeps on going to explain the whole idea of why Jesus fed the 5,000. And that's at the end of that whole story, he talks about him being the bread of life that came down from heaven. And so I just want you to know, in the middle of this miracle exists. And it's really, really interesting. The last time Jesus was with his disciples in a storm, what was he doing? Anybody remember? He was taking a nap, yes. He was taking a nap, and then he was bothered because they woke him up. They're like, I'm taking a power nap. Literally, power from heaven. No. But this time, he's not with them. So let's pick it up, okay? Let's jump into it. Okay, so that evening, Jesus' disciples went down to the shore to wait for him. But as darkness fell, Jesus hadn't come back. They got into the boat and headed across the lake towards what? All right, so what happens then? Soon, it says soon, a what? A gale. First of all, who says gale? Right? I was like, this is a cool translation. Gale, what does that mean? Anybody know? They're like, I don't know. A storm, okay? But gale sounds cool. Okay, so soon a gale swept down upon them, and the sea grew what? Very, very rough. It grew very, very rough. So they're like, okay, what was happening? What's happening? Let me ask you something. Could you be in a storm right now? Like, have you ever had an encounter where, and maybe this is the season for you, maybe you're watching online, that's why you're not here, because like life was going good and you did stuff that you have done before. Like these guys have been on the lake. They're fishermen. They know their stuff. But everything's good. But all of a sudden, things change. All of a sudden, there's a storm. See, I grew up in the Middle East, and I had different kinds of storms. When you think of a storm, I don't know what you think of. Let me tell you what I think of. I got a picture for you. This is what I think of, okay? We got pictures all over. Look at this. This is what I think of. You know what this is? A sandstorm, people. Grew up with them all the time. You got another picture as well? Maybe? Yeah, look at that. That's me right there. Not really. No. This is a sandstorm. So when I think of storm, thank you so much for that. When I think of storm, I think of sandstorm. In fact, I'm so connected to it. Ask my wife, I sleep with a sound app on my phone. Anybody else does? Yes, okay. You know what I guess mine is? Sandstorm. Sandstorm, yeah. I sleep to sandstorm. I wake up to sandstorm. I hated them, but anyways, there's part of me. There's part of me. The thing with these sandstorms is they come up really quick. You don't expect it. And so I just wonder, are you in a storm? Like it's a couple of things start happening, right? All of a sudden, the temperature changes, or there's a sudden change. I think for some of us, you're like, Naeem, I don't know how you know this, but yeah. Like last week, what was normal suddenly changed. My relationship has just suddenly changed. There has been a sudden end to something that I thought would last for a long time. In fact, I thought it would last forever. Naeem, I don't know, no one knows this, but there's been a sudden news. We just got this. This just happened. This is so fresh. All of a sudden, like you think thoughts like, where did this come from? You might be, my friend, in a storm. You might be in a storm. But then also it's unpredictable. You're also in a storm when things all of a sudden become unpredictable. What I mean by that is when you become unpredictable. If you ever find yourself going, confused of what you even feel, you're like, I'm happy, I'm sad. I believe, I don't believe. You're just up and down. You're like, I think it's hormones. Could be other things as well. But your life and yourself and your spirit is unpredictable. You're like, are you in a good place? Like when people ask you, how you doing? You're like, I'm good. It's not an explanation, it's a question mark. I'm good, right? What do you think? I'm good, right? I'm good. It's just unpredictable. If you find yourself in all of a sudden a condition where it's unpredictable, guess what? You might be entering into a storm. And then things get dark. Things get dark. Like even in a sandstorm, you can't see anything. You can't see anything. Partly because there's a lot of sand in your eyes. Okay? But you can't see stuff. And in another storm, you just can't. Everything gets dark. Have you ever woken up one day and entered into a new, I don't know, we'll say season or a new something, and all of a sudden it's just darker? Like you're down and it's not the fall, you know what I'm saying? Like the weather it's not the weather, it's just like you're just, I mean, all of a sudden, like it feels like you woke up one morning and hope did not wake up with you. You're just there, just there. You might be in a storm. You might be in a storm. So what happens in a storm, right? What happens? We know what happens but let's just continue what happens. So what happens next? It says about 3:00 in the morning, Jesus came towards them walking on what? Water. There it is. There it is. He's walking on water. Wow. He's walking on water. Now, are they in the middle of something? They're in the middle of a what? No, not a storm, a gale. Okay. All right. Okay. So when the disciples saw him walking on the water, they were what? Terrified with fear. They're like, what? And they cried out, it's a ghost. It's a ghost. Jesus spoke to them saying, hey, don't be afraid. Calm down. Take courage. What is this? What did he say? I'm here. So a couple things on this. First of all, this idea of in a storm. The first thing you notice in that passage, okay, is it's so interesting, is that God looks like a ghost in a storm. Like in a storm, God always looks like a ghost. So when you're in a storm, and if you are one, the ability to recognize God is limited. God looks like a phantom. God looks far off. God looks like it's a ghost. God does not come in a way that you're familiar with him. You are most likely, and I'm most likely, to be in the storm and him be present and us reclassify him as something else and something even terrible. God looks like a ghost in a storm. And then what we also find here is in this passage is this idea, like when they were terrified. They didn't know what was going on. He begins to speak to them, doesn't he? He says this. He says, I am here. I am here. Now the phrase I am is not like, yo, it's me. It's actually back to Exodus. You remember Exodus? If you don't remember the story, there was the whole Moses was told to go save his people, right? And if you remember the story, Moses is like, hey, I'll go tell the Pharaoh, yo, let my people go. I'll do that, but I have no authority. I used to have, privilege. I used to have that, but I left and I'm going back after 40 years and I have no credibility. And he goes like, I'll go tell, the Pharaoh to let these people go, but who sent me? Like whose authority? And then God says, tell them that who sent you? I am. See this, when Jesus says, I am, he's not saying it's me. He's nodding to I am who I am is here. I am is here. And here's why it's so interesting. Because all the other miracles mentioned in John, if you notice, Jesus is doing something which people think, oh, it's a magic trick. Water into wine, more food, blind man. This is all that. This is the first miracle in John where Jesus himself is the miracle. He didn't create water. No. Did he dip in the water and all of a sudden the water turned to wine? No. He is literally what? Walking on it. As if when he comes in, he goes, I just want you to know, I can't just do miracles. I am the miracle. And so when he says, I am, he's saying, God is here. And see, that changes what we can learn from this story. He says, I am here. And then he says, and then the miracle also says that God is with us in the storm. We can't recognize him. It is truly God and all his power, but he's with you in the storm. Have you noticed when Jesus walks into their presence, they can't see him? What is still happening? The gale, the storm. As if Jesus was trying to say, hey, when God shows up in the middle of your crisis, the crisis does not change sometimes. Like his presence doesn't stop the storm. Because what we think is, as soon as God shows up, God, we say things like, right, like, God, just what? Just show up. Just show up. Because if you show up, everything will change. And here, as if Jesus is saying, I am God, I said it, I'm walking because I'm defying all natural things. I'm defying gravity here. And I just want you to know, it's not my presence that stops the storm. It is my word and my will. Like when I say it, it'll stop. So I just want you to know that if you've been looking around in the midst of your storm going, God, where are you? Where are you? He might be actually walking on water that you think he's ghost. He is there. He's got all his powers, but he wants to be in the storm with you. He wants to be in the middle of the mess of the miracle that you are praying for and praying about. So we know this. But here's another thing that this miracle teaches us. It teaches a couple of things that is just so huge for us, okay? Because I think for some of us, we're just kind of stuck. We're just stuck in, I don't know, just this idea of like, this is my life. This is my relationships. Like, I am going to be single. We are not going to have a kid. I'm always going to be stuck at a dead-end job. I'm always going to struggle with finances. I'm always going to be stuck, like trying to quiet the voices in my head. I'm always going to feel insecure. I'm always going to feel a sense of shame. You're stuck. And here, Jesus shows up, says, I am, and then something happens, which John does not mention. Like I said, remember Matthew and Mark mentions this? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna move over to Matthew because Matthew records something that happens that John does not, for some reason, record. And so here's what happens. In Matthew, it says here that Peter and the disciples saw him, right? And then Peter said, hey, if it's you, tell me to what? For you to come, what? On the water. And then Jesus says what? Come. And then Peter got out of the boat, right? He got out of the boat and walked on water towards Jesus. Now, I just want you to know, like, this is pretty interesting. This is pretty like, okay, Peter. Like, this is serious. It's like, oh my gosh, he's walking on water. Peter's first thought is, you think I could do it? Like how many people did he talk to before he was like, hey guys, I think I'm gonna ask him. I'm sure no one's like, do not ask him. Do not ask him. Are you crazy? I don't think Peter asked because the answer was gonna be a flat no. Maybe he did ask and they're like, no, not gonna happen, And I don't know what kind of mind thinks of, can I try? Like this, I just want you to know that the spirit of Peter, I believe needs to remind us that in the midst of a storm, in the midst of insecurity, in the midst of all this, in the midst of despair, if the idea of wonder leaves us, we're doomed. In the midst of your pain, if curiosity leaves you, then hope believes. Because hope is the possibility of a better future. Hope is impossible. Hope exists in the wonder. Hope exists in the future. Hope never exists in the past. Hope always calls you forward. Not seeing, just calls you forward. And so Peter does it. He gets on and he starts walking on water. Here's a couple of things it tells us. Number one, it tells us, I got some points here, okay? Number one, you're not confined by what? Say it again. By my ability. You are not confined by your ability. What does that mean, Naeem? This is who I am. This is what I got to work with. I get all of those things. But if you and I are going to step into a miracle, if you and I are going to experience something that's beyond the natural, then you and I cannot be confined to my ability. This is not the person I am. This is not my personality. I can't do this. The whole I can't do this says, God, you can't. I'm not going to let God do it. But we have to move towards, if you're going to step out, then the first thing you have to know is God's telling us in the middle of this miracle is like, hey, please don't say things that confine you to your ability because I am bigger than you. Like in the middle of your mess, okay, I know you're the center of it, but in the middle of this miracle, you cannot center yourself. The miracle is me. So you have to believe. You have to believe that you're not confined by your ability. Second thing is you are not limited. And I'm not limited to my reality. My reality is I've got this issue. My reality is I have this much income. My reality is this, I have a dead-end job. My reality is I don't know what I'm going to do with my marriage. My reality is for the love of Jesus, can I get a date with normal humans? Normal humans, that's all I ask. And no BO, like that's all I ask. That's all I ask. Listen, I think if you're a single adult, I know, you're like, listen, I live in the unreal world. Like this is crazy out there. I get it. I want you to know that God's not limited by your reality and my reality. I know this is real, this is natural, but the dude is walking on water and he actually asked someone else to do it too. Peter's the only guy who can say in his resume, walked on water. No other disciple can. All the other disciples were like, oh, we were there when we did this and we were there and I handed the bread and oh my gosh and that. Walking on water? No, it didn't do that. The only guy. Because what did he do? He did not limit himself to what? His reality. And I know it's crazy talk, but we're talking about miracles here. Last thing he talks about is we cannot be, and this is, I'm hot on this one. This one is big. We cannot be imprisoned. We cannot be imprisoned by our possibility. My impossibility. It's impossible for me. You can't be imprisoned by that. Friends, I'm living proof that you cannot be imprisoned by impossibilities. I'm living proof that just being here, being on the stage, experiencing what I have in the US, I'm just telling you, I'm not imprisoned by what's impossible for me, what's impossible for an immigrant. We say it's the land of what? Possibilities, and I believe it. But it's the world of impossibilities with God. It's not just the land, it's the world with it. So we have to know these three things. So the story continues though, right? Because right now, what's happening? Right now, Peter's like, uh-oh. He's walking on water. He's going, selfie, walking on water. He's like loving this. What happens, right? Let's continue. What happens is, but when, help me out with this, because this is really interesting. When he did, what happened with the wind? When he what? When he saw the wind. First of all, how do you see wind? I think you feel it. You know, I thought about this. I thought, you know, when you see wind when you stop. You feel wind when you keep moving. Have you noticed something like that? Like you feel the rush of air as you're moving. When you move, you're feeling the wind if you're outside. Like you're going fast, and some of you guys go so fast. You guys should get tickets. Anyways. Okay, you go fast, you're feeling the wind. But you can stop and just notice the wind affecting everybody else. And I wonder if faith is like that. Because what happens? He saw the wind. He began to what? Sink. What are the disciples saying? What is John saying, who writes this? He's like, oh, I'm going to put this down. And he sank, Maybe his boys are like, I told you. So he starts sinking. And then he says, Lord, save me. Immediately, Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. First of all, how close was he to Jesus? You were right there. So sometimes in our life, in the middle of a storm, you can be relationally, physically, mentally, spiritually, very close to Jesus and still doubt. You could be right there and you doubt because you stopped moving. You see, faith that does not move drowns. Faith that keeps on walking floats. And so some of us, we've stopped spiritually moving. We're in the storm. We see the things, we just stop moving. And when you stop moving, you sink. I mean, if he was that close to Jesus, he could have just one more step. But just the terror. And I get it. I mean, I think of some situations and it just paralyzes me. How about you? I go, oh God, if this happened, and I don't want to do anything. So here we find that he's so close, but he's paralyzed and he starts sinking because faith that does not move sinks. It sinks. And then Jesus reached out his hands because he's so close. And he says this, which is really interesting. He says, you of what? You of little faith. Well, why did you what? Why did you doubt? And then it says what happens. And then when they climbed into the boat, the wind dies down. Then those who were in the boat worshiped him, saying, truly, truly, you are the what? Son of God. Now, let's go back to that phrase, you of little faith. Now, what's really interesting about that phrase, though, and how we have heard it, because when you say, hey, you of little faith, it's a dig, it's a shade. Does that make sense? It's like a, hey, how much faith you got? Little faith. And if we believe that, because we've been taught that, if you take that translation of you of little faith and take it into the context of what just happened, the first thing Jesus says, the guy who is Mr. Positivity, the guy who is like the leader of all leaders, the first thing when someone attempts something awesome, Peter walked on water for a long time to get there. He was far away enough because they thought he was a ghost. He kept on walking. He's been walking for a minute, gets to him, and he's been trying all this, and he's been doing so good all this time. What do you tell someone who has just rocked it all the way and just at the end just messes up? What do you say? The first thing is a slam? The first thing is what is wrong with you? Or you almost had it. No, you've been going great this whole time. You say, great job, right? Proud of you. That's awesome. That's awesome. But in this, the way we've been taught is like, you of little faith means you don't have much faith. And I would beg to differ. Because Jesus talks about this idea of little faith. Because I believe, Jesus believes and says that even little faith floats. Even little faith. Let me explain. What is little faith? So let's go to another passage where Jesus was talking about little faith. So let's go to it, okay? It's in Matthew, and it says here. It says, it's because you don't have enough faith. Let's stop right there. He's talking to disciples. They are trying to cast out a demon, okay? And doing some, again, supernatural things. And he tells them, hey, here's the problem. The problem is you don't have what? Enough faith. Enough faith. But then he says this. He says, but I can promise you, if you if you had faith no larger than a what? Mustard seed. But if you had little faith, let me see, I got a mustard seed for you here. Right here. You see it? This is it. Actually, there's nothing there. There's nothing there. It's tiny. I was going to illustrate that. I was like, you can't even see it. It's so tiny. So Jesus says, here's the problem. You don't have enough faith. I'll tell you the faith you need to have. You just need to have faith of the size of a mustard seed. If you just have little faith, let me just tell you what you can do. You can tell this mountain to move from here to there, and it would be done. Everything would be what? So when Jesus says, hey, little faith, I think I want to believe. I could be wrong. He was like, you got the little faith. You got faith to move mountains, little. Like, you little faith guy, come on. Because little faith, what? It floats. For some of us, you're waiting for a big faith to step out. You're waiting for big faith to do this business idea. Big faith to go back to dating, and that's big faith. Big faith for all those things. And Jesus is like, all you need is little faith. Oh, you have little faith. Now, but Naeem, he says, why did you doubt? See, I want to believe that Jesus says, hey, you have little faith. You have faith to move mountains. Why did you doubt that I would let you drown? That's the thing. That's what Jesus is saying. He's not saying, why did you doubt so you could walk on water, so you could be in the Guinness Book of World Records? No. He's like, you think I'm going to let you drown? Do you think you're going to? So see, some of us, or we find ourselves in a storm, we find ourselves in a problem, and we're like, oh my God, I'm going to drown. Oh my God, this is going to consume me. Oh my God, this is going to be the end of me. Oh my God, this is going to happen. Oh. And you're saying this because you're like, oh, I can't believe this is going to happen. Yeah, so when you say, oh my God, remember, you're using God, and God loves you. So God's not going to let you drown. And you're like, Naeem, I don't know, man. I don't know. I've had moments where I feel something has ended. And I understand those things. But here Jesus is saying, I just want you to know, you just need a little faith to just keep on walking. And I'm not going to let you drown. See, I know this to be a fact that all the things in our lives, the things that are just awful, the maybe even the trauma and the abuse, there's no answer for. And you know, some people would say, well, everything happens for a reason. I don't know about that, honestly. I don't know about that because there's some pretty awful things have happened in my life and other people's lives. And I'm like, that's a reason? I don't know if that's a reason. But I know this, not everything has to have a reason. But everything that has happened will be redeemed. Now that's a promise in the scriptures. That one day God and you are going to be in the same presence and same space. And it says that he will wipe every tear from every eye. And there will be no more mourning or crying or death. That there is a redemption that will take place to all the things that have happened to us. So as we know this, hey, all you and I have to do is ask ourselves, are we willing to take the step, the little faith step of faith, moving towards God, where God is calling us to? Are we willing to do that? Or are we going to live our lives playing around, entertaining ourselves, and I'm talking to myself, being super comfortable in the shallow water because I can touch the ground. I'm not going to attempt anything that I don't have a sure footing for. And I'm also going to wear a life vest. I'm always going to have a way to get out of the situation. I'm always going to have my own natural security. Are we going to live our lives in shallow faith with a vest on, or are we going to walk on water, open water, step out and experience the impossible? We're talking about miracles, so it makes total sense that we do. So I want to pray for us. Can I do that? Let's stand together. Stand together. God, thank you so much for this conversation. God, thank you that you're the God who tells us, God, you're the God who tells us that we should attempt things that are beyond our capacity. You're the God who shows us even how that's possible. You're the God who invites us to a life that really cannot be lived unless it's supernatural. You invite us to live a life that is born again, filled with your Spirit, with your presence. God, for so many of us, we live in a reality where we're worried about bills and people. We're worried about conflict. We're worried about sickness, a disease. God, we're worried about our lives turning around or being stuck in a certain place. God, we're really consumed with all kinds of things. We are. God, some of us, we are in the storm. We're in the storm. Some of us don't even know, but we might be getting ready to get into a storm. We see some signs. There's some stuff around the horizon that could go sideways. We just don't know. God, remind us about what you have spoken to us this morning. Remind us that you are the God that still does miracles. And God, most of all, set us free. Set us free from the prison of possibility. Set us free from there. God, for some of us, it's just so limiting our lives. So God, I pray that as we worship, as we sing this song, you seal a work that you've been doing in this time this morning. God, as we receive communion or go to the cross or light a candle, God, we will experience you in a way that we just never thought possible. God, in Jesus' name.